Today we're going to start digging into Bricksforge and specifically into the Pro Forms element and some of the options that it includes. Now we're going to focus on creating a front-end dashboard kind of thing, something very simplistic, but it's going to teach you some of the core fundamental skills that you need to be able to work with this Pro Form feature set. It's pretty useful, but let me show you quickly what we're going to look at recreating. Now I've got a listing of my posts and you can see each one of these has an edit post option underneath. So for example, the steak and bacon smash burger, which is making me hungry, click on edit post. We'll go over and we can start editing the post. We can change the title, the content, the featured image, and also any of the categories that it's associated with. Now, this is a very basic setup, but you can expand this once you understand the basic skills. Let's take a look at how we're going to build this all with Bricks Builder and Bricksforge. So I've logged into my dashboard and we're going to go and take a look at the pages because I only have 2 pages created. We've got the post list with the edit option, which is what we're going to start off with. And then we've got the edit post, which we're going to build from scratch. This is all we need to get things running. So let's edit this post list with Bricks first of all, so I can show you exactly what I've got set up. I'm not going to go through the entire process of this particular page because in all honesty, it's very, very simple. The only important factor is how we set up the edit button to transfer the information over to our edit page to make sure we're editing the right post. So we take a brief look over on the structure panel on the right hand side. You can see I've simply got a section with a container which is going to house everything, and then we've got a card block set up as a loop which is set up as a grid, and inside there we've got the image, heading, basic text and button. This is just pulling in basic dynamic data. So for example, the featured image for our image, the post title for our post title section, and so on. You kind of get the idea. You probably created this kind of thing hundreds of times. The button, this is where we need to pass over the relevant information. Now to do this, we need to set up the right link type and also pass over the relevant data. So to do that, we're going to make sure our button is selected, and on the content section on the left-hand side, we're going to change our link type over to external URL. Even though it's internal, it allows us to create and add in extra information so we can tag what we need to onto the actual URL itself. Now, the full URL, we're not going to use that. We're simply going to use the link to the page. So we're going to say edit-post and the slash. So this is the link to that page. Now obviously if you had this in subsections, you need to make sure you got the right link inside there. Once you've got that, we can then use the dynamic data options to start building things out. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a query to the end of this. So we're going to do question mark, ID equals, and that's going to pass over the ID for that particular post. Now all we need to do is click on the little dynamic data icon and choose the post ID. And you can see we now built a custom URL. So let's make sure this all works. Let's just save this page and test it. We'll open it in a new tab, and there's our page. So let's click on Edit Post. And you can see that takes us over to the Edit Post page. And if we take a look at the top of the URL, you can see this now puts in edit-post ID equals 5. Let's come back out and choose a different post. Let's try this chili pasta, edit our post. ID equals 11. You see what's happening? This is just basically passing it over via the URL. We can then filter against that on our edit form, which is what we're going to do next. So now we have our blank page ready to start building things out. So first of all, let's go and add our section in and our container inside there, and then we can go and add in our Pro Form element. So what we're going to do is we're going to search for Pro Form, and you can see this now drops in some basic fields. It's text, email, text area, and submit, and so on. What we're going to do is get rid of all of those. We'll leave our submit in there for now. That's perfectly fine. Now the Pro Forms can work in 2 different ways. If we select the Pro Forms and come into the fields section, we can, if we want to, add form fields directly inside here. This is the more legacy way of working, and we're not going to use that because while this is powerful, it also has some restrictions and limitations to what we can do by using the newer method. So let's delete that from here, say yes, we're sure, and we're going to ignore this field section for now. What we can do is we can add in our own custom fields. So again, let's come back to our plus. Let's just minimize all these. And you can see we've got this Bricksforge Forms section. And these are all the different kinds of form elements that we can place inside here. And as you can see, there's an awful lot. So we're going to start with some really simple basic things. The first thing is going to be the title for our post. So we'll select text just to insert that in. Make sure it sits above the submit button. And there's our first one. So next we need to put the element in to allow us to put the content in. So again, let's go back to our plus. Now we could use the text area, and this is great if you've got some basic text that you don't really want to have much control over content, formatting and so on. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the rich text option. This just gives us a little bit more control. We'll insert that, make sure it's in the right position, and there's our next field. Now we're going to come back and set all parameters and everything up as we build our form out. Next, we want to make sure we can handle the featured image for our post. So again, let's come back to our plus. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a file in this time. And again, we'll select that, make sure it's in the right place. And finally, we need to be able to allow them to actually select what category or categories that are actually used with this particular post. So we're going to use a pretty cool feature. We're going to use the checkbox wrapper, and this allows us to wrap all our checkboxes together, and it just gives us a lot more control over the older method of working. So now we've got that, you can see there's the basics of our form. Our text field for our title, rich text for the content, file for the featured image, and our checkbox wrapper to handle all the different categories that this particular post may be associated with. There's the first part of our form. So let's save this to make sure that we've committed everything. If we take a quick preview, you can see we have a basic form, nothing that you wouldn't expect. But obviously we haven't fleshed anything out. We don't know what content's going to go in there or anything else, or what the form is actually going to do. So let's handle that next. So let's go back and choose our Pro form. And once we do that, we now have options for what we want to do with this particular form. Now we've got the actions, and this is what we want to focus on first of all. So you can see what happens after someone clicks that submit button. What we're going to do is going to change this from email, drop the list down, and you can see there's an abundance of different options inside here for what you can do when you choose to submit that form. What we want to do is update our post. So we're going to scroll through and we can say update post. So now it tells it, once this form was submitted, that's what we wanted to do. We've got a success message, which you can customize. And we'll just pop in post successfully updated. Really simple. There's lots of ways you can handle this. But you'll notice now that we have update post. This is because we've chosen this particular action. If we chose another action, like for example, the confetti, you can see that opens up a second option. We can choose to configure that particular action. For this example though, let's remove that from here. We don't really want that. So we'll come to our actions, we'll delete it, and you can see that removes it from our set of options. Now if we open up the update post, this is where we can handle what happens, where the data comes from, and all those kinds of things. We're going to come back to that in a moment once we've set our form up to be able to show and display the data, which we can then update. So let's start with our title, which is our text field. Let's select that from the list and open up the general option. You can see this is being given a custom ID. Now that means nothing to man nor beast, so we can change this if we want to. So let's pop in post title. That makes a lot more sense, and making sure that if there's a space in there, you always put in an underscore or a dash or minus symbol. That makes sure that we don't have any issues. Now you've got other things inside here like patterns and so on, so you can set up expressions and things for more complex, but I don't want to get into that right now. I just want to show you the fundamentals of creating your first form using Pro Forms. Okay, so once we've done that, we've got some other options, things like your label, the value, and so on. So we need to set some things up inside here as well. So for the label, we're going to simply put in title. The value is where we need to put in the default information that's going to be preloaded when we filter our database for the post we want to edit. So from here, we're going to use our dynamic data option, select that from our list, and we're going to search for BRF. And you'll see when we do that, we've got some special fields that are part of Bricksforge Forms. You can see we've got calculations, titles, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull in the BRF post title. And that's pretty cool. But the problem is you'll see it pre-fills this out with edit post, which is the name of this particular file that we're editing and not the one that we actually want. So we need to address that. And to do that, we're going to use a parameter that allows us to filter or search or query data pulled in from various different locations. In this example, we're going to use a parameter from the URL, in this case, the ID. Sounds complicated, but reality is it's not that complex. So what we're going to do is let's open this up a little bit further so we can see what we're doing. We're going to get rid of this last curly bracket, and I'm going to paste in the code that we need. Let's take a quick look at that. So what this is saying is the BRF post title, and then we want to add another parameter on the end of it, and that is going to be the URL underscore parameter. And what parameter do we want to find? The ID, which if you remember back for the edit button, we pass over the ID for that specific post. And this is then going to filter it based upon that ID that's in the URL. Like I say, sounds complicated, but reality is it's pretty simple. And you can just simply copy exactly what I've done here. Now let's go and just test this out. So let's save this, take a look on the front end of our site, and let's just choose one of these to edit. We'll say this prosciutto and rocket pizza. We'll edit this, and you can see that now pulls in the relevant title. Let's come back out of here. Let's choose our spicy pasta, and you can see that pulls in the relevant data there. So it's basing that information from that URL parameter that we've just set up. Pretty cool. So let's move on to our rich text field, which is going to hold the content of our actual post itself. So again, let's change this custom ID and put this to post underscore content so it makes some sense to us. We'll do the same thing again. We're going to change the label, and then we're going to come to our value, and we're going to just select the dynamic data, do BRF. We're going to choose the option for our post content, and we're going to get rid of that last curly bracket, and we're going to filter that information exactly the same as we've just done. So again, that full colon, URL, parameter, ID. Can you get the picture for where this is going? We can leave everything else as it is, but if you want to customize the toolbar, and this is why we've used the rich text option, you can see we can choose a flat toolbar, a tooltip based, or the WordPress toolbar. And if we want to, we can just choose what features we want to include in there, so we can get full control over what is and isn't available to anybody that's adding or editing content. Pretty cool. We'll leave it as it is though for now, just so you can see how the functions work. Right, now let's move on to our featured image. Let's select our file. Again, let's change our custom ID. Set that to featured image. Again, we're going to change our label. Our value, like we've done before. Select this, BRF, to filter things down. There's our thumbnail URL. Remove the curly brackets at the end and just simply paste in our little bit of code to search the ID. And there's the basics done. Now we've got a couple of other things we can set up inside here, like what file types, the file size maximums and so on. So there's a couple of things I want to configure in here to make sure that everything works in a nice fashion. Now, because it's a featured image, we want to make sure that only one image can be uploaded. Do you want to choose the option to replace the file? We'll say yes, we do. And we're going to set a maximum file size of 2 megabytes. That's pretty cool. And then we can set the file types that we want. So we can just simply drop in things like JPEGs, WebPNGs, and so on. So just drop in all the files you want to support inside here. Always good to recommend to do this because then it limits the potential for uploading dodgy or malicious files. You may not want to allow SVGs. It's a good time to sort of set the allowed file types inside here as well. We're going to remove the option for hiding image preview. We want to make sure we can see it, but we are going to enable the disable file deletion option. We'll set the preview width. We'll set this to be something like 200 pixels, and you can handle exactly how the image is going to be displayed. Okay, so there's the basics of that all set up. So again, let's just save this to make sure we commit those changes. And now we're going to move on to our checkbox wrapper. Let's select it. Again, let's just change that custom ID. Set that to post category, change our label, and you can set up any flex, anything like that you want to show how you want to display this information. So there's the first part. That just kind of sets the style for this. Now if we come to the checkbox, this is where we set up what information is going to be displayed and where it's going to be pulled from. Now this is pretty cool because what we can do here is we can use a query loop to loop through all the different items. Let's enable our query loop, choose the option for our queries, and then we can set up what we want to show and display and how we want to display it. So let's set our type, and we want this to be terms. Then we're going to choose what term we want. For this example, we want categories for posts, but you can see there's other options inside here. And if you're creating custom post types, custom taxonomies, they'll be available to you as well. So let's choose categories for post. We can set the order in which way we want to do these. So you can set them to be no order, so they're just in a random order. Or you can say you want to set them by the name, parent, count, and so on. Let's set them to be by name, so they're alphabetical order, and I set sending, ascending. We're also going to come down and choose the option to show empty because obviously we want to be able to associate it with new categories that may not have anything associated with it yet. So let's check that option, and you can see you've got all the other options that you have when it comes to working with query loops anyway. So that's the first part of that done. Now we need to set where the labels come from and what values we want to use and anything else we want to check inside here. So first of all, let's set the label. We're going to choose our dynamic data. We're going to search for term. And this allows us to pull in all the term information. So you can see we've got term name, ID, slug, and so on. So this is the label. So we're going to say we want the term name. And you see that puts everything we want inside there. Now we need to set the value for what will actually be passed over. So again, let's select this second field, hit the little lightning bolt, type in term. And this time we want to pass in the term slug. Now make sure you use the term slug, not the ID. So we'll choose that option from there. And now we've got everything set up correctly for the label and the value. And you can see it's pulled in one. It's not pulling the loop in, but we'll see that on the front end when we test it. But you can see desserts is in there, but we know we've got everything started to work correctly. Now to make sure that any of these values that are already ticked will be displayed as opposed to a blank list, we need to make sure that we have conditionally checked enabled. That will check things if, well, they're checked. So how do we address it? How does it know what is and isn't checked? Well, if we choose the option for checked if, and we'll say it's enable post taxonomy term. We'll select it from the list, and that opens up some more options for us. Again, we're going to filter things based upon the ID of the post, and we're going to use one of the functions. So again, we're going to use the dynamic data, do a search for URL, and we want to use the URL parameter. We'll choose that from our list, and we need to tell it what parameter we want to use. So again, we're going to put in that ID. So we'll do a colon before the curly brackets and put in ID, making sure that the curly bracket is outside everything we've done there. So this is now going to check for that URL parameter, check against the ID of the post, and then display the information inside there for us. But we need to set the taxonomy key first before it'll know what to display and how to display everything. So for here, because we're working with the category, which is one of the native functions inside WordPress, we're going to just put in the word category. But if you were working with custom post types and custom taxonomies, you put the name of the taxonomy that you've created inside there. So you may have something like real estate, and you may have property location. Well, you put property location inside there to make sure that it knows exactly where to pull the data from. If you're working with a native function, category in this example is fine, or tags if you're working with tags. So there's the first part of it all set up. So now let's save this and test it to make sure that everything is working. So again, we're back on our test page. Let's edit our spicy chili pasta. And you can see there's our spicy chili pasta, our content, our featured image, and also our post categories. Let's choose a different one. Let's say, for example, we want to take a look at the vegan pancakes. We'll edit this. See, there's our vegan pancakes. We scroll down. You can see this is in desserts and vegan. So everything is working correctly. So we're pretty much there, but we do have one very important thing to do. Now, if we submitted this form when we edited things, it wouldn't know right now what post to update. Even though we've passed that ID over via the URL, and that pulls in the data for the actual editing page, when we save it, it doesn't know where to save it or what post to override or anything else. So we need to address that. And the easiest way is to put a hidden field in that'll contain the value of the ID of this particular post, and we'll pass that back to the database when we update things. So let me show you how to do that next. We're going to come back over to our elements, and this time we're going to just look for the hidden form field element, and we're going to simply insert that before our submit button. Now, it doesn't really matter where this goes as long as it's not inside that wrapper. As long as it sits inside the submit button area in our form, our pro form, that's perfectly fine. No one's going to see it. It just holds the value that we need to be able to pass that back when the form is updated. So we'll give this a name. We'll call this my _ post _ ID, our value. So we need to make sure that we pull this data from our ID that's being passed by the URL and then store it inside this hidden form field. So to do that, we're simply going to use the same function as we saw earlier with the URL _ parameter, ID inside curly brackets. That's going to store that relevant data from the URL. And that's now holding the data we want. So again, let's save this. And there's the first part. Our form has been created. All the relevant data is now being displayed in our form. So now we can go back and we can address how we want to update things with that action. So let's go back to our pro form, come back to our update post option, and now we can fill out the relevant information inside here to link everything up together so it knows what form element relates to the post ID, the post title, content, and so on. Sounds complicated, but again, it's just marrying up those relevant terms and information that we've already created. So first of all, we want the post ID. Now we know we've just saved that inside a hidden form field. So let's just select our hidden form field, open up general, and there's the custom ID for that form field. So we're going to copy that custom ID. So copy it from here, and we'll go back to our pro form, back to our update post. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in 2 curly brackets, paste in that post ID, close our 2 curly brackets. Now you can use a single curly bracket, but it's better to use double in various different instances because it avoids any conflict you may have with native Bricks functions. So we're going to use the double brackets side here. So then we've got the post title. So again, we want to make sure we got the right information. So what we can do is we can go back to our text, open up general, and you see there's our post title. So again, we can copy that from here, go back to our pro forms and update post. And then inside the post title, we can pop that inside there. And again, making sure we wrap it in those double curly brackets. Post content, well, I think you kind of got the picture. The post status, this allows us to choose what happens when this post is submitted. So if you have something that you allow people to make changes to their content, add content and so on, you may want to put this into draft or pending and not publish it straight away. But if you're doing it just for yourself or people you trust inside your company, you may want to set this to just be published automatically. So they make changes, it's published straight away. It's up to you. For this, we're going to just put in publish, but all you need to do is just use the options underneath and pop in what you want, draft, pending, publish, and so on. You kind of get the idea. So next up, we've got our post excerpt, date, and post thumbnails. Now we're not using an excerpt and we're not worrying about the post date at this point in time, so we're going to leave those as they are. But we are going to update the post thumbnail. So again, let's open up our double curly brackets. Let's just check that we've got the right information. So we go back to our file and general. There's our featured image. Probably would make sense to have all this written down or at least memorize what you're doing, but you kind of get the idea where we're coming from with this. So let's pop that in, close our double curly brackets. And the final thing we're going to need to do is set up our post taxonomies, which operates in a slightly different fashion. So let's click Add Item. And now we can set up the taxonomy slug and the term that's going to be used for it. So first things first, the taxonomy slug is going to be category. Again, remembering that if you created a custom post type and you wanted to use that, you just make sure you put in the right ID for that, or the right slug for that taxonomy. Like I say, this is the native function inside WordPress itself. And then we need to grab the term. Well, the term is going to come from, as you guessed it, our checkboxes. So we're going to come back to our checkbox wrapper. We're going to copy the custom ID for this, come back into our Pro Forms, open our double curly brackets, paste that in, close our double curly brackets, and we now have our form elements connected up to our update post action and knows now exactly what information to grab from any of the relevant form elements. So again, let's just save this and go back and test it and make sure everything is working as we expect it to. Okay, so let's edit our spicy chili pasta one more time. All our data has been pulled in correctly. So now let's make some changes. Let's say this is going to be a vegetarian meal as well. So let's hit submit. Now, you'll notice we get a little bit of a problem now. Some things are missing, hasn't been loaded in correctly. So we need to address that before we move on. So let's go back, choose our Pro Form. I'm going to scroll down to Other. And you see, this allows us to set what happens with our content. So we want to disable submit messages or disable form reset. It's up to you how you want to handle it. You can even set this to go to a different page once you've updated. But for argument's sake, we're just testing this. Let's disable form reset and hit save. This time we'll edit a different one. So we'll say our steak and bacon smash burger. We'll just change this over the title and we'll pop something inside the content. And now if we go and click submit, you can see our post has been updated successfully and our content is still being displayed with our edits inside there. If we come back out of this, you can see everything's been updated. There's our edited content. Everything is working the way that you want it to. Now, there's lots of things you can do to take this to the next level. You can put things inside here to make sure that only logged in users can access this content. You could filter the loop based upon the actual logged in users details. There's all manner of different things you can do. But hopefully what this has demonstrated is how to get started using the Pro Forms function inside Bricksforge for yourself. But as always, I welcome any comments, questions or feedbacks or other topics you'd like me to cover using Bricksforge. Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, my name's Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.